So the communist world becomes the enemy, or the Iron Curtain or whatever becomes the enemy of the West, or this divide of the world, and then the Middle East becomes, and all the rest of the world becomes a playground of competition over this. But so then in 1975, at the Kyoto Trilateral Commission conference, Zbigniew Brzezinski, prior to becoming then head of the Trilateral Commission and prior to becoming the National Security Advisor to Carter, proposed using state-sponsored terrorism as a way of winning the Cold War and controlling, overthrowing governments.
And you're saying Brzezinski got this terrorism started?
Well, he was proposing this as a way to win the Cold War.
Really? And what was he in? He held a position in our government, right?
Right. This was at that time he was head of the Trilateral Commission, and then he went over to become Carter's National Security Advisor. And Rabin was assassinated by the networks of Netanyahu and the settler movement, and that changed. That didn't help either. So Trump doesn't get a second term, and this thing disintegrates. The Israelis were financing, were supporting the Hamas to keep them at war with each other to prevent a unification. So there's all kinds of games being played. This is such a mess, and it's not going to get resolved unless the U.S. Works with Russia directly, and Trump comes back and works with Russia directly to cool the whole situation, and then go back to a two-state solution. In the Biden administration, you had the neocons who wanted to maintain the constant warfare. What's causing the drive for war is the globalist effort to eliminate the nation state, which is really what started all of this. Is really what's been driving this thing, is to use these conflicts to undermine nations, undermine cooperations between nations, and use these conflicts to prevent a world of sovereign nations. Actually, it's a continuation of that. It's a continuation of the original British East India Company, a resistance movement that has emerged under Donald Trump is threatening to take power in the United States, and it's a very serious threat to the globalists. It's the most serious threat that they have.
Hello and welcome to Take Control of Your Liberty with Scott Tregurtha, where we help critical thinkers by giving you the most true and accurate information we can find, which they should be giving you on mainstream media, but are not. So you can decide for yourself and take control of your liberty, your freedom, and your future. And now, here is Scott Tregurtha.
Hello, everybody. My guest today is Paul Glumaz, and you really need to hand it to Paul, as he's been educating people through articles, emails, and even in the streets on the subject of Israel and the Middle East. And he did this having no more access to information on Israel and the Middle East than you and me. But he took the time to study it and put some thought into it so he could convey it to the public. And we should all be glad he did, because this misunderstood part of the world has been a centerpiece of controversy and war affecting us all. So now, please welcome Paul Glumaz. Hi, Paul. Welcome to Take Control of Your Liberty.
Thanks, Scott, for bringing me in.
Yeah, sure thing. Glad to finally meet you face to face. So what we want to do today is, since you are pretty much an expert on the Middle East and Israel, and it's pretty hot over there right now. And of course, we just had that recent incident with the hostages over the weekend. Deepest sympathies for all involved in that. But there's quite a bit of history here, and it's not all about what's happening today. So I want to get into, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, who are behind all this, and is it possible or not to have a two-state solution? All these things everybody's arguing over. But first, I wanted you to give us some background, because I think a lot of us are not up to date on what really is happening there. So why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll dig into things.
All right. So I should begin by saying I don't consider myself an expert in this area.
Okay.
I consider myself somebody who's been thinking a lot about it for a long time and has access to what most people would have access to. So, and paying attention. So, the way I look at the situation historically is you have the breakup of the Ottoman Empire occurring and being assisted by many forces. And you had four different powers that wanted to have influence or control in the area. One was Russia, the other was Austria-Hungary, the third was the French, and the fourth were the British primarily. And from Britain and Austria-Hungary and Russia, you had separate Zionist movements being created as part of having influence in that region. That is, bringing in settlers, Jewish settlers into the area, which was the break. So the breakup of the Ottoman Empire occurred, and then in the course of the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, they expected to also break up what is now Turkey into a Greek and a Turkic, and you had the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which divided up the Middle East between France and parts of the Middle East between France and Great Britain. And then an anomaly occurred that they were not expecting, which was the emergence of a nationalist movement in Turkey around General Mustafa Kemal, who became known as Kemal Ataturk, and he defeated the operation to break it up. Defeated the Greeks. The Greeks pretty much were expelled, and then you emerged with what is called modern Turkey. And the significance of modern Turkey is that he saw the religious situation, the mullahs, the imams, as a negative to being able to have a modern industrial nation, a modern nation. So he outlawed and he ended the caliph. And the caliph is that, and this is very important. The caliph is based on the part of Islam where it says that government comes from a community of the faithful. It does not accept nationalities, as being a valid basis for. So you have this religious idea of uniting all of Islam under a caliph, and then the legitimacy of power comes from the caliph. And so you have the Baghdad, and then you had various different caliphs, and they all claim to be the legitimate what have you. So this was a feature that Kemal Ataturk tried to eliminate, so that he could have a modern nation and not be under this kind of thing. So he abolished the caliph, and then began in Turkey creating a modern nation. And this principle of nation of a nation became a threat to the imperial interests, primarily the British, but not only them. So the British in the late 20s, in response, created a movement which is today called, it was called the Muslim Brotherhood then, it was called the Muslim, which was an attack on the idea of a secular nation state. And an attempt to maintain or revive in various different ways, this concept of government by a community of the faithful, and then this has taken many forms. So you have in the Islamic religion these competing elements who are claiming that they are the legitimate continuation of Caliph, and I think Caliph means the successor. I think it means the successor. I'm not sure, but I'm not the expert here. But I'm just giving you a concept here of how this thing starts to develop.
Can you tell
So
us, 1 second, please, excuse me, can you tell us about what kind of time period we're talking
we're
at this
talking
point?
about in the 20s, 30s, 40s.
Got it.
This thing
Okay.
gets underway, and then the second phase of this is the post-war period, right, where you have the emergence of nations, but you also have it occurring in the context of the Cold War. So now you're shifting out of the previous imperial context into the context of the Cold War, where those same empires are trying to maintain their influence in the context of a nation. And they're coming to the United States to support their imperial orientations based upon a war, a Cold War with the communist world. So the communist world becomes the enemy, or the Iron Curtain or whatever becomes the enemy of the West. So this divide of the world, and then the Middle East becomes, and all the rest of the world becomes a playground of competition over this. But this is how nations are caught in between the emergence of nations is occurring, but it's not occurring in the very best way. And then as this develops, you have the period prior to the dollar being taken off the gold reserve system in 71 and the consolidation into the floating exchange system. And then you have the period after that in which the oil from the Middle East, the Saudi oil in particular, and the oil from the Middle East was a very important component of the world economy. And so the 73 war and the oil the oil embargo by the Saudis and the raising of the oil prices and you had the emergence of the petrodollar system. So the petrodollar system became very important. So in terms of controlling, in terms of the world, it established basically in the offshore exchange system, it established the dollar as the universal means of exchange globally, which actually hurt a lot of the developing countries and so forth. So anyhow,
what would you say your definition of a petrodollar is then exactly?
It's just that if you have to get oil, you got to use dollars to get the oil, and therefore
U.S. dollars.
U.S. dollars, right? That's what they accept the oil payment in. You have to go around. That may be changing now, but the point I'm getting at is in that context, the problem is where those dollars, right, that were accumulating in the oil countries like Saudi Arabia, those dollars are surplus dollars, and who gets to use those surplus dollars? Where do those surplus dollars go? And so one of the policies that a lot of the saner people in the region wanted to do is let's invest those dollars into the development of the Middle East. But you have this permanent war going on, permanent conflict going on. And it's difficult to do that when you have permanent conflict going on, in which people are taking sides. And efforts to try to resolve the Arab-Palestinian, the Israeli-Palestinian issue was met with many different subterfuges. The Temple Mount, the radical Zionists, Hamas, which is an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood, for religious reasons or other reasons or operations or what have you. So then in 1975, at the Kyoto Trilateral Commission conference, Zbigniew Brzezinski, prior to becoming then head of the Trilateral Commission and prior to becoming the National Security Advisor to Carter, proposed using using state-sponsored terrorism as a way of winning the Cold War and controlling, overthrowing governments and all of that. And so we began to move into that realm of state-sponsored terrorism, uh, with the development of the situation in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen, and then the Muslim Brotherhood operating out of Britain, bombing, running massive terrorism against Egypt. So you had the beginning of these mercenary armies.
And you're saying Brzezinski got this terrorism started?
Well, he was proposing this as a way to win the Cold War.
Really? And what was he in? He held a position in our government, right?
Right. This was at that time he was head of the Trilateral Commission, and then he went over to become Carter's national security advisor, which he was for the period of the Carter administration. And after the communist system collapsed, he and Samuel Huntington proposed that the world would be based on the clash of civilizations, or the clash of cultures. So they were.
And who is Samuel Huntington? Who's
Samuel Huntington? Is part of the network of that includes Brzezinski. They were proposing a permanent war situation between cultures. So now Islam is the problem, and an Islam Christianity thing, or Shia versus Sunni. They were proposing using religious differences, cultural differences as the basis for conflict.
Was Huntington part of the U.S. government, or what was he?
He was, but I think he was more like a think tanker, an advisor. But he was at one point. He may have
Gotcha.
been. And then, I'm being very general here. So then, and this is all about, conquering Russia and conquering economic. You had the Chechens emerge, and opposition in Russia, and after they lost their war with Putin, they all migrated into becoming leaders of terrorist organizations, jihadi organizations. So all of this was. Then you had the work of somebody by the name of what's his name, Bernard Lewis, and you had something that somebody by the name of Thierry Messiaen calls the Rumsfeld-Zabrowski doctrine, which is to create total chaos in the Middle East. And so all of that's coming in, and then the Israeli side of it is the Jabotinsky networks, who are operating in a similar way, and you have a mess. And every time there's an effort to try to put an end to the mess, like the Oslo Accords, and then later what Trump tried to do, which was actually quite brilliant, the Abraham Accords. Right. He basically went to the entire Islamic world's leadership, 55 in Riyadh, and said, we're gonna end state-sponsored terrorism, period, and we're all gonna have to learn to live together. And that was an embedded two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. The problem with the original Oslo Accords was it was sabotaged by the International Monetary Fund, by a faction in the U.S. That I think is called the Way Forward. That these were the neocons. These were the early neocons. They sabotaged the whole thing. The whole thing got sabotaged, and it was very complicated and it was very difficult. There were too many games, and it didn't work. And Rabin was assassinated by the networks of Netanyahu and the settler movement, and that changed. That didn't help either. So there's been a powerful interest in the world that want to maintain a permanent conflict.
So you're saying Netanyahu was in on having?
Well, the networks. I'm saying networks. I can't prove who that he was in on it or not, but it was the networks that were associated with him in the settlers movement. That were
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So then So Trump doesn't get a second term, and this thing disintegrates. So there's different reasons for why people do different things, but the problem is that you're on the verge of a religious war. Um, the Palestinian situation is really terrible, both because they've been internally in a civil war between the two factions, the Islamic versus the secular faction, the Hamas versus the other faction under formerly Yasser Arafat. Anyhow, that name escapes me. There are two factions. One runs the West Bank, the other runs the Gaza, and at the point that Arafat's faction was consolidating power and were able to negotiate, make good on the deal, the Israelis were financing were supporting the Hamas to prevent to keep them at war with each other, to prevent a unification. So there's all kinds of games being played. This is such a mess, and it's not going to get resolved unless the U.S. Works with Russia directly, and comes back. Trump comes back and works with Russia directly to cool the whole situation, and then go back to a two-state solution, which is much more difficult now because a large part of the Israeli population is not willing at this point, as they were, to agree to a two-state solution because of everything that's happened. So it's going to be a very difficult thing to do, but it's not going to be it's not going to come from Israel or Hamas or Iran or Egypt or wherever. It's going to come from the major powers deciding that they're not going to allow this situation to go off into a nuclear war or to a regional war or a situation where Israel is so threatened that it will use its nuclear weapons, and that's really what has to happen. And the current the Biden administration couldn't do that because in the Biden administration you had the neocons who wanted to maintain the constant warfare, did not want that arrangement, and then you have Kamala coming in, and if she were to come in, I'm not saying she's coming in.
Yeah, please don't say that.
And you have Kamala's orientation, which is going to be the same, only she's not going to be making the policy. Neither was Biden making the policy. So you have a situation where they're not in a position to actually change the course of the war. What's causing the drive for war is the globalist effort to eliminate the nation state, which is really what started all of this. Is really what's been driving this thing, is to use these conflicts to undermine nations, undermine cooperations between nations, and use these conflicts to prevent a world of sovereign nations. Instead, we've been moving towards a war of globalism, where you have nations being undermined and becoming satrapies of a global financial system, and they're not sovereign. And so there's a resistance to that coming from all over, from especially China, and that's a whole nother issue, and especially Russia. Russia doesn't want to be broken up, which is the policy of the neocons, and they'll go to nuclear war. But so the Middle East is kind of.
Can I pause you just for a second there? I want to clarify a couple things. So would you say the global? You're saying Biden and Harris aren't really the ones steering the boat here. So are you? Is it the globalists who are basically doing that?
So yeah, it's being done through the Obama apparatus.
I got it. So Obama's kind of a middleman there, right?
Right. He built. Well, he's part of the apparatus. He's very close to the British, and very close to the globalists, and before him were the Clintons, and
Well,
and the Bushes.
the big question is, why do these globalists want to have all this disruption going on over there and never letting anybody come together?
Because the development of nations is the development of the people of nations, which is the development of a class of people that would not accept a world governed by oligarchs, governed by poverty and war and famines and disease and destruction, of keeping populations from becoming developed has always been the policies of empire. They've never really wanted that kind of world. And
They want to be able
empires
to be
always,
in control. They want
they want to be in
control.
control, and the oligarchic element and the element in that views themselves as overlords, and they don't want to be challenged by science and technology and industrial development and all of that. They don't want to be challenged by that. They don't want people to develop to the point where they are able to think for themselves and act in the interest of the nation, act in the interest of the common good. They don't want a society like that.
So it's basically the same people we were trying to break away from in our American
Correct.
Revolution.
Actually, it's a continuation of that. It's a continuation of the original British East India Company. Today, it's the same. It's the same heirs of that and the same outlook. And so they're trying to depopulate the planet. They would like to depopulate the planet. They would like to end the ability of a nation to develop. That's the climate change stuff. That's part of that. And the Middle East is a very key control point. And oil goes to China. That's a threat. You cut off the oil of China. You can use that as a control point. So all of this is and then all of this is now coming to an end because their system is no longer sustainable. Because of its destructive power, it's no longer sustainable and without causing resistance. So there is a growing resistance in every country towards the globalists, and they have to have more strong measures to suppress that resistance. And that includes especially the United States, where you have a resistance movement that has emerged under Donald Trump as threatening to take power in the United States, and is a very serious threat to the globalists. It's the most serious threat that they have, as Donald Trump coming into the presidency, because the presidency, not the one we have now, but the actual presidency as designed by the founders, is a very powerful institution, and it can act in such a way that it in collaboration with other nations could change the whole rules, can change the rules completely to the benefit of nations, and that's what they're afraid of. Because it's a natural thing for any people who come together as a nation to want to promote the development of the nation and improve the general welfare for themselves and their posterity. That's a natural thing. But now they're in constant conflict. It's very hard to realize that now. And then you have corruption of politicians around all of that, and religious efforts to create religious conflicts, ethnic conflicts. And now they're flooding the U.S. and Europe with refugees from all these negative situations around the world, and they want to use that to break up the national identity of each one of these countries and create a nonsense of a national identity. In the U.S., it's going to be harder to do than European countries because our national identity is not just ethnic; it's more tied to our principles that in which our country was founded. But nonetheless, that is being done, and that's why they're doing. That's part of why they're doing it. Is to change the whole nature of our sense of who we are, and with different cultures and languages that are different, and people not identifying with and then they bring in DEI and all of that to accentuate that. So,
And
you know,
transsexualism and
all of that to
the whole nine
accentuate all of
yards.
that. Yeah. So that's also causing a lot of people to wake up and resist. So we're entering an incredible period. I think there's far more support for what Donald Trump is doing in the world, in the United States, than what people realize, and also outside of the United States for what Trump represents potentially as a president.
Absolutely. And thankfully, people are waking up to this. They want what he's offering and so on. The sane people do. Uh, the people who are, like you said, it's a natural thing to want to expand and live together. But it's not natural for insane people to do that. And that's who's gotten the upper hand to an extent these days. So, do you have more history to bring us up to date, or do you want to get into what recently happened in last October at this point?
Okay, so um, I'm not clear on the details of, I've heard a lot of different angles on this, um, but had Trump, and he's correct on this, had Trump managed to get a second consecutive term, then he would have created the circumstances where Israel would not have been isolated. They already were negotiating recognition by Saudi Arabia, and there would have been a negotiated recognition by Iran. What happened what made matters much worse was the invasion of Iraq. That made matters much worse, and what happened there. But nonetheless, Trump had brought everyone together, and basically, Iran was under pressure to negotiate and recognize Israel, and on the Israeli side, it was also being worked, and that was very hard because Netanyahu was opposing Trump in all of this. He was undermining Trump and opposing Trump, but Trump had a lot of support for these policies within Israel. And then it's important to note that Trump's negotiated deal with Iran would have not been a deal to use them as a justification for conflict. We're going to negotiate a deal with you, and you're going to be able to do what you have to do as a nation for yourself. We're not going to interfere with that. We're not there, like the neocons, to use these conflicts to undermine your nation, which is why you could never get peace, because they were using all of these conflicts to undermine nations. There was no intention of having peace from the British, especially, and their influence in the U.S. and the U.S. policy of Bush and Bush Jr. and Obama. There was no intention of having peace. It was intention of using the conflict for whatever reasons they wanted to use it. So we were very close to a resolution. But so why, as far as I'm concerned, why did the October events happen? Because there were powerful forces that wanted to not have a resolution. They wanted to stir it up and keep it stirred up and risk a nuclear war, because also there's the financial side to it, and it's also a geopolitical side to it. If you're fearful of a war, then that increases the influence of the United States, who you have to run to for protection. Also, if it's unstable, it threatens the global financial system, because if it's unstable, it helps the global financial system because the capital flows are not going into to physical economic development. They're going into the offshore financial system for speculation. So by keeping the world completely on, you're actually controlling. You're actually having an impact on the flow of investment and capital flows by doing so. So you can't, if it's unstable, you don't have the economic stability to chart an economic development course. So all of that was being threatened by Donald Trump, and when he comes back, it's even going to be more threatened. But the situation has gotten a lot worse. As a result, the conditions for peace have gotten much worse, and and Hamas is terrible, and it's a continuation, extension of the Muslim Brotherhood, but only an outside force in the region is going to be able to put it together. It's going to be able to work with all the parties to make it happen. And right. Now, we don't have. The United States is not that force for good that is required.
Yeah. No, the United States leaders are actual pawns of the very people creating this mess.
Right.
But
that's true.
And from what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong. What was I going to say? Oh, now the October 7th thing that occurred, you're not sure of who exactly planned that or did that or whatever, but you just know it was used in a way to destabilize things over there.
Yes.
And whoever the exact players were, we can find out. But for the sake of this discussion, set that aside. Now we're in this mess, and another mess. I mean, we've got the general mess, right? The whole destabilization over there done by oligarchs. But now we've got this, the mess we see with our eyes in the news, right? We've got Netanyahu on one side, and we've got the Palestinians and the what's the main group over there?
PLO.
No, the people who are holding the hostages.
Hamas.
Yeah, Hamas. Yeah, we've got Hamas over there, and we've got Netanyahu, and we've got the people protesting for Palestine. And it's like, who's right and who's wrong here? I've heard negatives about all sides. Can you break that down a little bit? Like Netanyahu, what's his position on this? Go ahead.
Okay, so there's Netanyahu historically, and then there's the current Netanyahu who has enabled the most extreme radical Israelis. Historically, Netanyahu's father was the secretary in the United States for Vladimir Jabotinsky. Okay. And Vladimir Jabotinsky view was a Jewish state, basically a fascist Jewish state. That's what that's what Ben Gurion called him, the leader of Israel, that helped to create Israel. He called him Vladimir Hitler. But this is the network that Netanyahu comes from, and he's able to play off the emotion of the conflict to maintain power, and that's how he has operated. Going back, use that emotion to, and then you have in Israel this network of people that are like of the view that the Palestinians shouldn't even exist, because because of the history of the whole situation.
And the Palestinians don't feel the Israelis should exist.
Exactly, and because of how everything has developed. But the political power in Hamas is based on the hatred of Israel, and the political power of at this point of Netanyahu is largely based on a fear and terror of being eliminated by the angry Arabs. So that's that kind of situation needs to be diffused, and it was in the process of being diffused. So, but now it's been stoked up to a point where basically at some point, if the Palestinians are keep getting killed and wounded, at some point the Arab street will start overthrowing or threatening to overthrow the governments of Israel's neighbors because they're not taking action against Israel. That's the whole lever of influence on Iran and is that you're not doing what you need to defend the people that are being butchered and being killed. So that leads to a regional war, and at this time in a regional war, you have much stronger forces arrayed that would be arrayed against Israel. Syria has emerged as a relatively strong force. Turkey is a very strong force. Hezbollah inside Lebanon is very significant. The Houthis in Yemen are quite demonstrated. They were able to survive a war with Saudi Arabia for a decade, or maybe not a decade. And then you have Iran, which has developed militarily. I mean, you have Saudi Arabia, which has also developed militarily. So it's a regional war. Would require Israel would require to have the United States get involved, like the United States is involved in Ukraine, and provide and also NATO to provide support for Israel. If they don't support Israel, then Israel has the nuclear blackmail. So that is a very nasty situation, and that is a trigger. But that nasty situation works as a kind of control mechanism to blackmail the world. And
yes, it does. And I just want to ask you a couple things here. So we've got Israel on one hand using emotion to say, look at these horrible Arabs, we've got to wipe them out, right? And we need your help, and so on, right? And we've got the people here. Our people on one side are saying, yeah, why aren't we helping Israel blast the hell out of these people, right? And that's not really a solution. But then you've got the people on the other side who are actually doing things to create justification on Israeli side to want to wipe them out. From what we can see, they're taking these hostages, they're shooting them, they're killing them, and so on. I mean, what should actually be done here?
Okay, so you're raising the much bigger question, which is, to what degree is this being played back into the United States?
Right.
As a way of not just dividing the United States, but also preventing Trump from becoming president, because he's not on either side. He doesn't want to be forced into having to wipe out the Palestinians, and he doesn't want to be forced into supporting Hamas or supporting, etc. So he's very much in the middle, and it's a very difficult situation. And I believe that that he's going to be painted as the wipe out the Palestinians type person, even though he's not. That's not where he's coming from. For the massive demonstrations that could come if he gets elected, so that will be part of it. And then you have all these people running around about the anti-Semitism in the campuses and everything, and this is a perfect way to change the subject on the fundamental crisis that the United States is facing, which is the mass migration into the United States, the collapse of the inflation, the collapse of the living standard, and the war situation, the endless wars. This is how this is always used. It's always used to change the subject. We're changing the subject. We're forever changing the subject away from what nations have to do to survive and improve the condition of their people. You're always using these conflicts to change the subject. So this is a good example of what you're talking about. What you just described is a good example.
And this is creating the big confusion. But just to cut through it all, what should be done, and what do you think Trump will do?
Trump will outfox him. Trump will go to Russia and Putin and say, look, this is out of control. We need to do something. And Putin has a lot of influence in Israel, and he will go to the Arab countries and he'll go to the Israelis and say, okay, you got to stop this crap. Okay, that's it. I mean, he has that. The United States has that capacity to organize a solution. No other country has a capacity to organize a solution. The United States has that capacity. And Trump knows. That's what Trump is saying. He's saying, he's not telling you the details, but he's saying, I could end this war. Could end it.
Right.
Yeah. But that's how it works. But in doing so, and this is the most important point, he wipes out the power of the world globalists, the globalists. He wipes out their power because that's how they control things. So he wipes out the power. Once the United States and Russia start to agree on all this stuff for their mutual benefit, then the control is over. The control over the world by this global financial blob and the permanent wars and everything else like that will end right there. And that's why the situation with Trump is so dangerous.
To them.
To them.
To them.
Yeah, to them. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so when you say Trump will basically he'll handle it, and I believe he will. I mean, he's the type that will just come in there and say, all right, we're just going to all sit down and figure this out and handle it. And that's going to be the end of it. And it is literally that simple. These oligarchs are the ones that complicate everything with all this war and making one side, pitting one side against the other. But does this mean, coming to a solution in all this, would that solution be a two-state situation?
It would probably be, yes. And it would probably be, but you have a lot of corruption in both Israel and also in the Palestinians. They have the tremendously corrupt leaders, and also in Israel you have corrupt leaders. So you got to deal with that as well. In a two-state solution. But yeah, you would need a two-state solution. There's no way out of that, I don't think. But you have to create the conditions for that.
So, and there are people who seem like they're good guys saying a two-state solution is impossible. In fact, I just heard, I just saw yesterday, I believe what he was the former ambassador to Israel under Trump, saying a two-state solution is impossible.
Well, it might be. And if it is impossible, what are you going to do with all the Palestinians? You're going to kill them? You're going to move them to another part of the world? You're going to put them on the moon? Well, I mean, what are you going to do? You know, and what's that going to cost? So it I disagree
I do too.
because it's the only way you can resolve it. And if you don't resolve it, then you're going to have a mess, and it's going to get worse.
Right. Yeah, I don't see any reason to say a two-state solution is impossible. We can have whatever we want, really. If all of the good guys get together and decide that's what we want, and Trump would lead the way,
right?
And, we can have that. To say it's impossible is saying, I don't know. It's like saying anything's impossible. Like you're never going to make a living, right? You're too stupid and dumb, and you come from a bad neighborhood, so you can never be wealthy. It's the same kind of thinking. We can do whatever we decide to do. If we would wise up and not let the masses be controlled by these tiny bits of insane people. So that's my thinking on it. So is there any more you think we should know about this situation? Because the people are in the dark quite a bit on all this.
The reason why ultimately a solution is possible is because with a Trump administration, a second administration, this wasn't possible in his first administration, but in his second administration, there will be a unified U.S. policy. It won't be a divided U.S. policy where you would have one policy and then there would be another policy to undermine that policy. Whatever positive policies the U.S. had were always being undermined. So it's a question of empire. If you don't have this permanent conflict, then you're essentially ending the empire. That's the imperial system of geopolitics. You're essentially ending the imperial system of geopolitics, and that's big. That's big. That's a huge change from the way the world has been running. But that was implied in the creation of the United States, as President John Quincy Adams said. We want a community of principle governing our relations between sovereign nations. And that's where we have to go ultimately. Because empires must collapse because they're based upon keeping people backward and plunder and preventing development and initiating conflicts. And there comes a time when you can no longer control it. It goes out of control, and you have permanent. You could have a nuclear war. Of course, we're operating in a world where you can't have a full war. You have to have a war under the level of a nuclear war, and that's kind of good and bad. It's good because it's a boundary condition that you have to operate in. It's bad because it's being used to allow. The threat of it is being used to allow permanent war going on beneath the level of nuclear war. So it's not good, but it's the threat of the nuclear war currently that could be a key factor in breaking elements of the oligarchy into realizing that the alternative that they have to back off from their orientation, because it's going to lead to nuclear war, or at least a large portion of the establishment will wake up and say, look, this is heading towards nuclear war. We got to change it. And with somebody like Trump coming into the White House, that's very important. So I wouldn't be surprised if that reality is what played a key role in Kennedy's and Tulsi Gabbard's support for, and other supports coming from many different quarters towards Trump that are now emerging, because some of those people do see that this is heading towards world war, regional war, and world war. And also, you could say the same for the Ukraine situation. So they realize that this is the reality, and normally people would knuckle under and just say, well, that's just the way it is. But you do have a potential in Donald Trump and in the MAGA movement in the United States that is behind Trump to actually have a vehicle to prevent it. And I think that's one of the primary calling cards for elements of the establishment to swing over, who haven't done so already, to swing over in support of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I agree. These people like Gabbard and Kennedy and Musk, they're all kind of saying, well, we got to put our differences aside here because they are petty compared to nuclear war or World War III, and we got to just get these idiots the hell out of here and out of power so we can have a discussion, so we can actually sit down and talk, yeah. Because right now, true. Yeah, it's literally just so we could have a sane conversation here. Right now, we're just all trying to stay alive.
Right.
So, and is that what you meant by this time when Trump's in there, we're going to have a united, I believe you used the terminology united policy. Is that what you said?
We're going to have a policy. Okay. I'll use this example. Okay. China and the U.S. are very intertwined economically, and and when Trump imposed the tariffs on China, basically the Chinese were saying to Trump, look, we understand that the system we're in is not a good system, but we have made the best of it, and we've managed to benefit from it. But we agree that the system is rotten. The globalist system is rotten. So what system do you want to replace it with? And Trump was under massive attack the whole time. So from the standpoint of the Chinese, and also from the Russians, they don't see a unified policy because they don't see Trump having control, having the power to realize what the policies are that he represents fully. So then they're not going to bet on Trump, and they're not going to operate from that standpoint because they don't see the control. But what will happen if Trump comes in and he manages to live and survive and become president, and the way he's going to function is they're going to see Trump as being unified, representing the United States as a nation, in which case they can negotiate and deal with him for a new architecture financially, because the one that we're in now, for all of the things that are required to change the course of humanity towards one of economic development, and that's what I mean by unity. I think
I got it. Okay.
Talking about unity within the United States so that it can represent the positive policy without these countries for thinking that that the person presenting it is too weak to be able to.
Oh, I got you. Okay, so we got China and Russia are going to have faith in Trump.
They're going to have faith that he means what he says and he's going to do what he says, and it's not this other force, the British, the globalists, are going to interfere and disrupt it, and so that's, run operations to disrupt it, because that's how it works. You can never get a secure policy, because there are elements that will come in from behind the scenes, or and certain situations will set in place that will disrupt it, and that's why that's what has to happen. Trump has to have And so the whole process by which Trump is getting elected is he's going out to the with policy. So he's moving into the unions, he's moving into the ethnic communities, the African American communities. He's moving in everywhere to discuss policies, to discuss how we're going to deal with all these things. And that is big time because he's educating the people who have nobody has done that yet with the American people to the degree that Trump is doing that. And that's very important because those are the people that are going to have to back him up once he's in the White House. The grassroots has to back him up once he's in the White House. They can't just say, well, he's president now, it's up to him. No, they're going to have to back him up. But they're not going to do that unless they have a sense of what the policies are, that they are brought in to understanding the policies. And so a large part of the Trump campaign right now is a process of educating a population that's completely uneducated as to what the real issues are. And I mean, the basic issues, yes, but not understanding the full story. So that process is now underway. And this is really a big change for the United States to have an increasing number of people becoming aware politically in a way that they've never been aware. And that's why you have this massive effort to censorship. I mean, it's like, we can't have this. This is going way too far. This is going completely out of our control. We have to censor. And the First Amendment is now the enemy of democracy, as far as these people are.
Right.
They're actually saying it. The First Amendment is an enemy of democracy.
Absolutely. I just heard recently, I forget who it was, came right out and said, it was in the New York Times, that the U.S. Constitution could be our enemy, something like that. Or a threat. I think our biggest threat is the U.S. Constitution, something like that.
So that means we're making headway. Okay.
Now, so this is what you meant by the people being united. They're going to be educated, more educated.
They're going to be educated,
and that brings us to, of course, there's Agenda 47, and that's Trump's policies for those out there who aren't aware. And then we've got the GOP platform, which is virtually the same thing. And I do think we've got a ways to go, even if Trump gets elected, for the masses to be educated and brought up to par on all this, don't you?
Well, he has the pulpit as president to do that, and to send people all over to get that process going.
And you think he's going to do that? I mean, he's already started to do it.
Right. Well, FDR did that when he was in the presidency with his fireside chats. Those were educated. Those were educational for his day, for the masses that were not educated. This was his way of explaining why he was doing what he was doing. And I think Trump can do that. I think Trump can go out and explain to people why things have to be done. And that's an incredible power. That's actually the most biggest power that you can have as a president, is to be able to go out to the population and explain to them. Kennedy was doing this. Why you're doing this, not some manipulation, not some talking point, not some narrative, whatever, but just go out and explain. This is why we have to do this. This is why we have to do that, and it's obvious. It becomes obvious to people. Oh yeah, you're right. That's exactly right, But if that dialogue is not going on with the president, then it's much harder. People get you have all this noise in the background, all this distraction, all of the all the stuff that's taking people's attention away from the most important things.
Yeah, it's called communication. I mean. It's what it is. It's that simple. And Trump is stating his policies. He's got them in writing. They're all over his website and various other places. And that's his side. And then when you go to Harris's side, you've got Joy. And if you go to her website, all you got is a button to push to donate. I actually went there and looked myself, and that's it. So I think we've covered a lot, and I hope my audience is getting this, and if they're not, I always invite them to email me, and I can answer. I can go to you and get answers, and give them answers if I'm not sure. But is there anything more you think we should cover for this particular?
I think we've gone quite a ways. Yeah,
I do too. I do too. I think if people just heard this and then watched it more than once and thought about it, discussed it, I think we'd have come a long way. So I thank you so much, Paul, for enlightening us, because we don't get this on the news, any of the news. So I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, it was great being on your show, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Paul, and we'll be talking. Thank you all for listening. Please remember to like or subscribe, or both, depending on which platform you're viewing or listening on. I hope you've come out of this interview a little more informed on the subject of Israel and the Middle East. And remember, it's all intentional and brought to you by the modern British Empire. I personally am very much looking forward to President Trump ending much of this mess, as well as in the Ukraine and many other parts of the world, because it's fight, fight, fight the establishment bad guys. If you have any questions or comments, my contact info is on my website at takecontrolofyourliberty.com. So please feel free to contact me. And until next time, remember to take control of your liberty, because you don't want anyone doing that but you.